Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Warning. Robert Beck had always prided himself on reading people. 20 years as a courtroom sketch artist meant he'd watched thousands of faces lie, break down, and reveal truths they'd tried to hide. He'd captured the micro-expressions of murderers, the trembling lips of witnesses, the cold calculation behind every defense attorney's smile. It was a skill that bled into every aspect of his life, one that should have warned him sooner. But love, he'd learned, was the greatest blindfold. The October afternoon had started like any other. Robert sat in his home studio, charcoal-stained fingers hovering over a canvas as he worked on a commission, a portrait of Judge Marilyn Cole for her retirement. Through the window, amber leaves drifted past, and somewhere in the house, his 8-month-old son Tommy was supposed to be napping. His wife Vivian had taken the baby to her office that morning, something about showing him off to her colleagues at Wise Financial Group. At 3:47 p.m., the front door crashed open. "Dad!" 12-year-old Lily burst into his studio, her backpack still slung over one shoulder, face drained of all color. Her chest heaved like she'd run all the way from the bus stop, 3 blocks uphill. Robert dropped his charcoal. "Lily? What's wrong? Where's Tommy?" Her voice cracked on her brother's name. "Where's the baby?" "At your mom's office. She took him this morning, remember? Said something about—" "No." Lily's hands were shaking. She grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "No, Dad, we have to go there. Right now. Please." The fear in her eyes was visceral, real. Robert had seen that look before, in courtroom victims, in parents who'd lost children. His daughter knew something that terrified her. "Lily, talk to me. What happened?" "There's no time." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I heard them talking. Mom doesn't know I know. Dad, please, we have to get Tommy." Robert's mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. He'd noticed things lately, Vivian's late nights, the way she'd started keeping her phone face down, how she'd moved the baby into the nursery down the hall instead of their room. Small things, dismissible things. Until now. "Get in the car." Robert grabbed his keys from the desk, his phone, his wallet. "Call your mother. Tell her we're coming." Lily was already running for the garage. "She won't answer. She never answers during their meetings." Their meetings. The way Lily said it made Robert's stomach turn. The drive to downtown Hartford should have taken 20 minutes. Robert made it in 12, running 2 red lights and ignoring the speed limit. Lily sat rigid in the passenger seat, her phone clutched in white-knuckled hands, trying Vivian's number over and over. No answer. "How do you know Tommy's in danger?" Robert kept his voice calm, controlled, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. Lily's words came in a rush. "I forgot my math textbook this morning. I came back to get it before you woke up. I heard Mom on the phone in the kitchen. She was talking to him, Mr. Weiss. She said—" Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "She said today was the day. That after today, you wouldn't be a problem anymore. That they have everything." Robert's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Alphonse Weiss, Vivian's boss at the investment firm where she'd worked for 6 years. A man Robert had met exactly 3 times. At company holiday parties where Weiss had smiled his perfect smile and made jokes about market volatility while his eyes lingered too long on Vivian. And Tommy. Robert's voice was dangerously quiet. "Mom said the baby would be perfect, that he'd make you come running." Lily turned to him, her young face aged by fear. "Dad, what if it's a trap? What if they hurt him to hurt you?" Robert's mind shifted into a different gear, the same analytical focus he used when capturing criminal expressions. He saw the pattern now, the picture Lily's words were painting. But he needed more information. Did she say anything else? Anything about what they're planning? Something about papers and insurance. And Lily hesitated. And getting rid of evidence. The words hit Robert like a physical blow. Papers, insurance, evidence. His wife and her boss were planning something, and his infant son was somehow part of it. The Weiss Financial Group occupied 3 floors of a glass and steel building in Hartford's business district. Robert parked illegally in front, not caring about tickets or towing. "Stay in the car," he told Lily. "No way." She was already unbuckling. "I'm coming with you." Robert wanted to argue, but one look at his daughter's determined face told him it would be pointless. Besides, maybe having her there would keep him from doing something he'd regret. Maybe. The lobby was all polished marble and pretentious modern art. A receptionist sat behind a curved desk, her smile professional and empty. "I'm Robert Beck, here to see my wife, Vivian Beck. She's in a meeting with Mr. Weiss." The receptionist's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. "I'm sorry, sir, but Mr. Weiss specifically requested no interruptions during this meeting. If you'd like to wait, I'm not asking for permission." Robert kept his voice level, but let steel enter his tone. "Which floor?" "Sir, I really can't." Lily stepped forward. "My baby brother is up there. Our mother brought him. If something happens to him while you're following protocol, how will that look for your company?" The receptionist's professional mask cracked. She glanced at her computer screen, then back at them. 17th floor. Executive suite. "But please, don't tell Mr. Weiss I." They were already moving toward the elevators. The ride up felt endless. Robert watched the numbers climb, 10, 11, 12, and forced himself to think, to plan. If this was a trap, he was walking right into it. But if Tommy was in danger, he had no choice. "Whatever we see up there," he told Lily quietly, "stay behind me. Understand?" She nodded, her face pale but determined. The elevator chimed. 17th floor. The doors opened onto an elegant reception area, empty at this late hour. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers. Down a corridor lined with abstract paintings, Robert could see lights spilling from an open doorway. He heard voices. Vivian's laugh, that light, musical sound he'd fallen in love with 16 years ago, and a man's deeper rumble in response. They moved silently down the corridor. As they got closer, words became clear. Perfect timing, really. Alphonse Weiss's voice, smooth as aged bourbon. "Once the policy clears, we'll have everything we need. Are you sure the detective won't find anything?" Vivian's voice, but different. Harder. Colder. "Detective." Robert mouthed to Lily. She shook her head, equally confused. "Relax, darling. By tomorrow morning, Robert Beck will be Hartford's most wanted. The evidence we've planted is flawless. Your traumatized wife reporting your violence, your threats, your descent into paranoia. And when he inevitably flees to avoid prosecution." Weiss's voice took on a satisfied tone. "Well, accidents happen, especially to desperate men." Robert's blood ran cold. They weren't just having an affair. They were framing him for something, planning his death, and making it look like. He reached the doorway and looked inside. Chapter 2. The Horrifying Truth. The executive office was a monument to wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, mahogany furniture, a bar cart stocked with bottles that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But Robert barely registered any of it. His eyes locked on the scene before him. Vivian reclined on a leather sofa, her blouse strategically unbuttoned, lips swollen from kissing. Alphonse Weiss stood by the window, straightening his tie, both of them looking relaxed and satisfied. Between them, on a coffee table, sat Tommy's car seat. Empty. "Where's my son?" Robert's voice cut through the room like a blade. Vivian jerked upright, her face cycling through shock, fear, and then, chillingly, calculation. Alphonse turned, his handsome features arranging themselves into an expression of concern that didn't reach his cold blue eyes. "Robert, I didn't expect you." Vivian stood, smoothing her skirt. "Tommy's fine, he's just—" "Where's my son?" Robert roared, stepping into the office. Lily stayed in the doorway, her phone out recording. Alphonse moved between Robert and Vivian, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Mr. Beck, I understand you're upset, but you're disrupting a private business meeting. Your wife and I were discussing her promotion, and I heard everything." Robert's eyes never left Vivian. "The detective, the evidence you've planted, the accident you're planning for me. Where's Tommy?" Something shifted in the room. Vivian's mask of concern dropped, revealing the stranger beneath. "You weren't supposed to know yet. Not until tomorrow, when they found the drugs in your studio, the threatening messages I'd report to the police." She glanced at Alphonse. "We should have moved faster." "Mom." Lily's voice was small, broken. How could you? Vivian's eyes flicked to her daughter, and for a moment, something like regret passed across her face. But only a moment. You're too young to understand, Lily. Your father is limited. Small. I deserve more than a struggling artist who can barely pay our mortgage. The mortgage I pay, Robert said quietly, dangerously, with the money from my court work. The work that allows you to spend every dollar you make at that firm on designer clothes and spa days. Alphonse laughed, the sound grating. How delightfully middle class. Arguing about mortgages while your life crumbles. He pulled his phone from his pocket. I'm calling security. You're trespassing, Mr. Beck. And given your documented history of instability. What history? Robert took a step forward. The one you fabricated? The one I've been carefully constructing for 6 months. Alphonse's smile was a shark's grin. Your increasingly erratic behavior. Your paranoid accusations about your wife's fidelity. Your drinking problem. Oh yes, the bottles in your studio that you don't remember buying. The concerning statements you've made to neighbors about harming yourself and others. Robert's mind raced. 6 months ago, Vivian had insisted they join a new country club, meet new people. He thought she was trying to expand their social circle. Instead, she'd been introducing him to witnesses who'd testify to his instability. Very thorough, Robert said, but you still haven't answered my question. Where's Tommy? Vivian exchanged a glance with Alphonse. He's safe. For now. In a secure location with someone we trust. You'll get him back after I'm dead? Robert's voice could have cut glass. After your accident that's supposed to look like I fled the country and disappeared? Tell me, what's the insurance payout? 2 million? 3. Alphonse's expression hardened. 5, actually. Vivian was wise enough to increase your policy last month. You signed the papers without reading them. So trusting. Robert remembered. The stack of documents Vivian had brought home, claiming they were updates to their estate plan. He'd been working on a major commission, distracted, and had signed where she'd pointed. How many other documents had he signed without reading? The baby, Robert said again, his voice dropping to a lethal calm. Last chance. Vivian stood, moving behind Alphonse like he was a shield. You think you're in a position to make demands? Security will be here in minutes. They'll find you threatening me, violent, unhinged. It'll be perfect proof for the restraining order I'm filing tomorrow. And Tommy, she smiled, cruel and cold. Tommy is with Alphonse's sister, Tammy Weiss. She's a registered nurse, completely respectable. When I report your dangerous behavior, when the police find the evidence we've planted, Tammy will testify that I beg her to keep my baby safe from his violent father. And when I turn up dead? Robert asked. Suicide, Alphonse said smoothly. A mentally unstable man, facing prison, losing everything. It's tragically common. The authorities will find your body in your car, pills and alcohol, a note confessing to your paranoid delusions. Vivian will be the grieving widow, devastated by her husband's decline. And in 6 months, after a respectful mourning period, she'll marry me. We'll raise Tommy together, collect your insurance money, and live the life we deserve. Lily was crying now, but still recording, her phone steady. Robert felt a strange calm settle over him. He recognized this feeling from the courtroom, the moment when all the evidence aligned, when the picture became crystal clear. His wife and her lover had crafted an intricate trap. They'd thought of everything, prepared for months, positioned all the pieces. But they'd made 3 critical mistakes. First, they'd underestimated him. They saw a gentle artist, a devoted father, and assumed he was weak. Second, they'd done all this in front of witnesses. Lily was recording everything, every confession, every admission. And third, most fatal of all, they'd threatened his children. Robert Beck, the man who'd spent 2 decades studying human nature, who'd captured the faces of the guilty and innocent alike, who understood the psychology of criminality better than most psychologists. That man will have walked away, called the police, trusted the system. But Robert Beck, the father? The man whose infant son was being held hostage, whose daughter was crying in the doorway, whose family was being destroyed. That man was done playing by the rules. Lily, Robert said calmly, never taking his eyes off Vivian and Alphonse. Call Uncle Rico. Tell him I need him. Now. Vivian's eyes widened. Your brother? Robert, don't. Oh, now you're worried? Robert's laugh was cold. Now you remember that my younger brother isn't quite as limited as me? That Rico Bonilla served 12 years for armed robbery before he found legitimate work? It was a lie. Rico was his best friend from art school who'd changed his surname after a family falling out, and he ran a successful gallery in Boston. But Vivian didn't know that. Let her think he was calling in criminal connections. Alphonse's hand moved toward his phone again. I'm calling security. This is over. Make the call, Robert said softly. But first, answer one question. What makes you think I came here without a backup plan? For the first time, doubt flickered across Alphonse's face. Robert pulled his own phone from his pocket, turned the screen toward them. I've been recording since the lobby. I heard every word you said before I entered this room. Conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping. That's what? 30 years minimum. Vivian's face drained of color. You're bluffing. Am I? Robert hit a button on his phone. Alphonse's voice echoed from the speaker. By tomorrow morning, Robert Beck will be Hartford's most wanted. The office door burst open, but it wasn't security. Chapter 3. The unraveling begins. 3 uniformed Hartford police officers entered, followed by a woman in a gray suit carrying a badge. Lily had called 911 from the elevator while Robert was confronting Vivian and Alphonse. Detective Francis Griffith, Hartford PD. The woman's voice was crisp, professional. We got a call about a possible kidnapping and conspiracy. Who wants to tell me what's going on? Alphonse recovered quickly, his smooth mask sliding back into place. Detective, thank God you're here. This man, he gestured at Robert, has been harassing my employee, Mrs. Beck, making wild accusations. I believe he may be mentally unstable. He's right. Vivian stepped forward, tears springing to her eyes with remarkable speed. My husband has become increasingly paranoid over the past few months. His drinking, his accusations that I'm unfaithful. I'm terrified of what he might do to me or our children. It was a masterful performance. Robert could see the officers' expressions shift, could feel them reassessing the situation. To them, he probably looked like the aggressor, a man who'd burst into his wife's workplace, making wild claims. That's an interesting story, Detective Griffith said. Except we've been listening to this office for the past 40 minutes. The color drained from Alphonse's face. You see, Griffith continued, pulling out her own phone, we received an anonymous tip this morning about suspicious financial activity at Weiss Financial Group. Potential money laundering. When I called to schedule an interview, your secretary mentioned that Mrs. Beck was in a very important do not disturb meeting with you, Mr. Weiss. Given that Mrs. Beck wasn't on the schedule for any official business today, I found that curious. She nodded to one of the uniformed officers, who produced a small black device from his pocket. So we got a warrant to place a listening device in your office. Imagine my surprise when instead of catching financial crimes, I heard you two planning to frame Mr. Beck for various offenses, discussing his murder and admitting to kidnapping his infant son. Vivian stumbled backward. No, we were joking. It was just $5 million in life insurance. Griffith raised an eyebrow. Planting evidence? Hiring a nurse to hide a baby? Those are very specific jokes, Mrs. Beck. I want my lawyer, Alphonse said flatly. Of course you do. Griffith gestured to the officers. Alphonse Weiss, Vivian Beck, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and kidnapping. We'll add more charges as we investigate. As the officers moved forward with handcuffs, Robert felt a hand slip into his. Lily pressed against his side, still trembling. Where's Tommy? Robert asked Griffith. They said he's with someone named Tammy Weiss. Already on it. Griffith pulled out a radio. We have units en route to 3 addresses associated with Tammy Weiss. We'll find your son. She's at the Hartford Heights Apartments. Lily spoke up. Unit 412. I heard Mom giving her the address last week when I was supposed to be asleep. Griffith relayed the information. Then she turned to Robert. Mr. Beck, I need your statement. All of it. But first, she glanced at the uniforms leading Vivian and Alphonse toward the door. First, Let's make sure you get your son back. The ride to Hartford Heights was a blur of sirens and flashing lights. Robert sat in the back of Detective Griffith's unmarked car, Lily beside him, both of them silent with tension. Every minute felt like an hour. When they pulled up to the apartment complex, 2 patrol cars were already there. An officer stood by the entrance, radio in hand. "Got the baby," the officer called out. "He's safe. Suspect is in custody." Robert was out of the car before it fully stopped. He took the stairs 2 at a time, Lily right behind him. On the 4th floor, he found paramedics checking over Tommy in his car seat, the baby crying but seemingly unharmed. "Daddy!" Tommy reached out with chubby arms. Robert scooped him up, pressing his son against his chest, breathing in that baby smell of powder and innocence. Tommy's cries subsided almost immediately, his small hands fisting in Robert's shirt. "He's okay," one of the paramedics said. "No signs of distress or harm. But we'll take him to Hartford General for a full checkup to be safe." Lily wrapped her arms around both Robert and Tommy, and for a moment, the 3 of them stood there in the hallway, a family broken but together. A woman was being led out in handcuffs, Tammy Weiss, presumably. She was shouting about lawyers and a legal search and seizure, but her protests faded as officers put her in a patrol car. Detective Griffith approached. "Mr. Beck, I need you to come to the station. We have a lot to untangle here." "I understand." Robert shifted Tommy in his arms. "But first, the hospital, then I'm all yours." At Hartford General, doctors confirmed what the paramedics had said. Tommy was physically fine, a bit dehydrated, slightly hungry, but unharmed. As Robert fed him a bottle in the examination room, Lily sat beside them, her phone finally put away. "Dad!" Her voice was small. "Did you know? About Mom and Mr. Weiss?" "No." Robert met his daughter's eyes. "I suspected something was wrong, but I never imagined." He trailed off. "How did you tell your 12-year-old daughter that her mother had planned to murder you?" "I'm sorry, Lily. I should have protected you from this." "You did protect us." Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. "You came when I said we needed to go. You believed me." "Always," Robert said. "I'll always believe you." His phone buzzed. A text from Detective Griffith. "We need to talk about something else we found. It's important." At the police station 3 hours later, Tommy asleep in a car seat and Lily waiting in a family room with a victim advocate, Robert sat across from Detective Griffith in an interrogation room. A folder lay on the table between them. "Your wife and Alphonse Weiss have been busy," Griffith said. "Very busy. The evidence they planned to plant on you? They'd already started. We found a storage unit rented under your name." "You didn't rent it, did you?" "No." "Inside, we found 2 kilograms of cocaine, a gun used in an armed robbery 3 months ago, and a laptop containing child pornography." Griffith's expression was grim. "They were building a case that would have destroyed you, Mr. Beck. Even if we proved the murder conspiracy, these planted crimes would have been investigated. Your life would have been torn apart." Robert's hands clenched on the table. "How did they get my name on the rental agreement?" "Forged signature. We're comparing it to documents you legitimately signed. But there's more." Griffith opened the folder. "The money laundering tip we received? It's real. Alphonse Weiss has been running a sophisticated scheme through his investment firm, using client funds for unauthorized high-risk trades. When those trades failed, he needed money to cover the losses. That's where your life insurance came in. He was going to use my death to fix his financial crimes. Partially. We've also found evidence that he's been skimming from other clients. Your wife knew about it. In fact, she helped him hide it. She has access to the firm's accounting systems. Together, they've stolen approximately $8 million over 3 years. The number made Robert's head spin. $8 million. And they would have gotten away with it if they hadn't gotten greedy. If they'd just stolen the money and disappeared, we might never have caught them. But they wanted to frame you, too. They wanted to destroy you so completely that even if suspicions arose, you'd be the suspect, not them. Robert thought about his wife, the woman he'd loved for 16 years, who'd given him 2 beautiful children, who'd been his partner through struggles and triumphs. How'd he miss this? How had the man who read faces for a living not seen the monster sleeping beside him? "There's one more thing," Griffith said quietly. "Tammy Weiss, the sister? She's not a nurse. She's a drug addict with a history of child endangerment. Her license was revoked 5 years ago after a baby in her care nearly died from neglect. Your wife and Alphonse left your infant son with her. The rage that swept through Robert was incandescent. Tommy could have died, not as part of their plan, but from pure negligence, from the reckless cruelty of people who saw his son as nothing more than a pawn. What happens now? Robert asked, his voice hoarse. They'll be charged. The evidence is overwhelming. The recordings, the planted evidence in the storage unit, the financial crimes. Both Vivian and Alphonse are looking at decades in prison. Tammy will face charges too. And my children? What about them? You'll get full custody. Given everything. Griffith's expression softened. Given everything, Mr. Beck, you're free. You're the victim here. Your life is your own again. But as Robert left the police station, Tommy in his arms and Lily at his side, he didn't feel free. He felt like a man standing in the ruins of everything he'd built, trying to figure out how to construct something new from the wreckage. The late evening news was already running the story. Financial advisor and wife arrested in murder-for-hire plot. Robert's name was mentioned, but as the victim, not the perpetrator. Small mercy. At home, Robert put Tommy to bed in his crib, then helped Lily with a dinner neither of them had an appetite for. They sat at the kitchen table, picking at pizza that had gone cold. What happens to Mom? Lily asked quietly. She'll go to trial. With all the evidence, she'll probably plead guilty. She'll go to prison for a long time. Good. Lily's voice was hard, and Robert's heart ached for her, for the innocence she'd lost today. Lily, it's okay to still love her. She's still your mother, even after everything. I don't want to love her. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. She tried to kill you. She would have made Tommy grow up without a dad. She would have let us think you were a criminal. How can I love someone who would do that? Robert pulled his daughter into his arms. You don't have to figure that out tonight, or tomorrow, or ever, if you decide you can't. But hatred will hurt you more than her. I know that's hard to hear right now. They sat together in the quiet kitchen, two people trying to make sense of the senseless. Robert's phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Beck, a woman's voice, nervous. This is Georgia Bradley. I work at Weiss Financial Group. I heard what happened. I thought you should know. There are other people at the firm who suspected something was wrong. Alphonse had us all terrified. If you need witnesses, if you need people to testify to his character or what we saw, will help. Thank you, Robert said. I'll give your name to Detective Griffith. 3 more calls came that evening. A neighbor who'd seen Vivian and Alphonse together and had felt something was off. A colleague from the courthouse who'd noticed Vivian's expensive new wardrobe and wondered where the money came from. A teacher at Lily's school who'd been concerned about comments Vivian made about Robert. The web Vivian and Alphonse had woven was unraveling, and people were stepping forward to pull at the threads. That night, after Lily was asleep, Robert sat in his studio, staring at the unfinished portrait of Judge Cole. His hands were steady, the same hands that had held his son, protected his daughter, recorded his wife's confession. But inside he was trembling. He'd won. His children were safe. The monsters were caught. So why did victory feel so hollow? Because Robert realized this wasn't victory. This was survival. The real fight was just beginning. Not with Vivian and Alphonse, who were finished, but with the system, with the aftermath, with rebuilding a life from ashes. And with the knowledge that he'd have to explain to Tommy, someday, why his mother wasn't there. Robert picked up his charcoal and began to sketch. Not Judge Cole, not a commissioned piece. Just Tommy's face, sleeping peacefully, innocent of the machinations that had threatened to destroy him. I'll protect you, Robert thought. Both of you. Whatever it takes. He didn't know yet what that would mean. But he would figure it out. He always did. Chapter 4. Buried Secrets. 3 days after the arrest, Robert Beck sat in the office of Joshua Chandler, one of Hartford's most ruthless prosecutors. The man had a reputation for never losing a case. A reputation built on meticulous preparation and a complete lack of mercy for defendants. Your wife is trying to make a deal, Chandler said without preamble, sliding a document across his desk. Robert scanned the paper. Vivian was offering to testify against Alphonse Weiss in exchange for a reduced sentence. 12 years instead of life. No, Robert said flatly. Chandler raised an eyebrow. Mr. Beck, I understand your anger, but a guaranteed conviction of Alphonse Weiss. I said no. Robert met the prosecutor's eyes. They planned this together. They're equally guilty. If Vivian gets a deal, what message does that send? That women can participate in murder conspiracies and get leniency? That mothers get special treatment even when they endanger their own children? It's exactly about that. Robert leaned forward. I've sat in courtrooms for 20 years, Mr. Chandler. I've watched the system bend over backward to give breaks to defendants who show remorse, who help the prosecution, who cry and apologize. Vivian is counting on that. She's counting on people feeling sorry for her, on the optics of the poor wife led astray by the powerful man. Don't give her that. Chandler studied him for a long moment. What do you want? Maximum sentences for both. No deals. And I want to make sure the financial crimes are prosecuted too. Every client Alphonse and Vivian stole from deserves justice. That's not how the system usually works. Then break the usual. Robert stood. You want to know what will guarantee a conviction? Let me help. I know things about Vivian, about her patterns, about how she thinks. And I'm willing to dig. Whatever you need, I'll find it. After leaving the prosecutor's office, Robert drove to the Hartford County Clerk's office. Detective Griffith had given him the case numbers for Vivian and Alphonse's various charges. With those, he could access public records, financial filings, property records, business registrations. He spent 6 hours there, taking notes, photographing documents, building a timeline. What he found chilled him. Vivian and Alphonse's affair had started 18 months ago, shortly after Tommy was born. But their financial crimes went back 3 years, which meant they'd been partners in theft before they became partners in bed. The romance was secondary. This had always been about money. More disturbing, Robert found a marriage license application filed 2 years ago in Vivian's maiden name, Palmer, to someone named Stephen Humphrey. The application was never completed, but the date was suspicious. It was filed while she was still married to Robert. Robert drove to the address listed on the application. It led to a neighborhood he didn't recognize, middle-class homes with well-kept lawns. He knocked on the door of the house, matching the application. A man in his 50s answered, stocky, graying hair, kind eyes that narrowed when Robert introduced himself. You're Vivian Palmer's husband? Stephen Humphrey said. The current one, I mean. How many are there? Robert asked. Stephen's laugh was bitter. Come in. You want to sit down for this? Inside, over coffee neither of them touched, Stephen told his story. He'd met Vivian 4 years ago at a financial seminar. She'd been charming, brilliant, vulnerable, claiming her marriage was falling apart, that her husband was abusive, that she needed help escaping. She had me completely fooled, Stephen said. I gave her money, bought her gifts, even helped her open bank accounts that her controlling husband supposedly didn't know about. We were going to get married, start fresh. Then one day, she just vanished. Took about $40,000 from my accounts and disappeared. Why didn't you report it? I tried. Stephen's expression darkened. But she was smart. Every transaction looked legitimate. Loans I'd agreed to, gifts I'd given willingly. The police said it was a civil matter, not criminal fraud. I hired a lawyer, but Vivian had covered her tracks too well. By the time I tracked her down, she was with you, pregnant, playing the loving wife. Robert felt sick. You're saying this is a pattern? I'm saying your wife is a professional con artist. Stephen pulled a folder from a drawer. After she left, I got obsessed. I hired a private investigator. He found 3 other men before me. All successful, all financially comfortable, all claiming Vivian had scammed them. But none of them could prove it in court. She's too careful, too manipulative. Robert looked through the folder. Names, dates, amount stolen. One man had lost $70,000. Another had been left bankrupt. A third had nearly committed suicide. Why are you telling me this? Because maybe you can do what we couldn't. Stop her. Stephen's voice was hard. And because I saw the news. She tried to have you killed. That's an escalation. She's not just stealing anymore. She's willing to destroy lives completely. Someone needs to stop her before she does this to someone else. Robert drove back to Hartford with the folder on his passenger seat, his mind racing. This changed everything. Vivian wasn't just his unfaithful wife who'd gotten greedy. She was a predator with a pattern spanning years. He called Detective Griffith from his car. "I need you to reopen some cases," he said. "Multiple fraud victims. And I think there might be more charges we can bring against Vivian." That evening, after putting the kids to bed, Robert sat in his studio with everything he'd gathered spread across his desk. Financial records, testimonies from Stefan and the other victims Stefan's investigator had found, timeline of events, photos of documents. A knock on the door. Lily stood there in her pajamas. "Can't sleep?" Robert asked. "I keep thinking about Mom." Lily came in, sat in the chair by his desk. "Did you know she was like this before?" "No." Robert's throat was tight. "I thought I knew her. But people can hide who they really are, especially from the people who love them. Were any of it real? Did she ever really love us?" It was the question Robert had been asking himself for 3 days. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe at the beginning. Maybe parts of it. But somewhere along the way, she chose money and comfort over truth and family." "I hate her," Lily whispered. "You're allowed to." Robert pulled his daughter close. "And you're allowed to grieve for the mother you thought you had. Both things can be true." The next morning, Robert met with a lawyer, not for Vivian's case, but for his own protection. Marcel Harrell was a family law attorney who specialized in complex custody cases. "I need full custody of my children," Robert said, "and I need to make sure Vivian has no claim to them or to any of our assets." "Given the criminal charges, that shouldn't be difficult," Marcel said. "But I'll be honest with you, Mr. Beck, this is going to get ugly. Your wife will fight from prison. She'll claim she was coerced, manipulated, that Alphonse controlled her. She'll try to paint herself as a victim to get sympathy for a reduced sentence and eventual custody rights. Let her try." Robert's voice was cold. "I have evidence that she's been running cons for years, long before Alphonse. She's the predator, not the prey." Marcel leaned back in his chair. "That changes things. If we can establish a pattern of fraudulent behavior, it demonstrates character. It shows she's not a woman led astray, but a calculating criminal. We can use that in custody proceedings. Do it. Use everything." Over the next week, Robert became a man with a singular focus. He tracked down every victim of Vivian's past schemes. He compiled evidence of every lie she'd told, every manipulation, every theft. He worked with Detective Griffith to build an ironclad case that went beyond the murder conspiracy. And slowly, a picture emerged. Vivian Palmer, later Vivian Beck, had grown up in a wealthy Connecticut family that had lost everything when her father's real estate empire collapsed in the 2008 financial crisis. She'd been 18, accustomed to luxury, suddenly living in a modest apartment while her father faced criminal charges for fraud. Robert found an article from a local paper about the scandal. There was a photo of teenage Vivian at her father's trial, her face carefully blank. In that expression, Robert recognized something he should have seen years ago, the same cold calculation he'd witnessed in Alphonse's office. Vivian had learned from her father, learned that money was all that mattered, that other people were marks to be exploited, and she'd spent the next 15 years perfecting those lessons. Robert had been her longest con. 6 years of marriage, 2 children, a life built on lies. She'd genuinely seemed to love him, had been a good mother to Lily, had built a home with him. But it had all been scaffolding for the real goal, finding someone wealthier, more successful, someone like Alphonse Weiss. And when that opportunity arose, she'd been willing to burn everything down to seize it. "She's a sociopath," Detective Griffith said when Robert shared his findings. "Classic narcissistic personality disorder with sociopathic tendencies. Lack of empathy, superficial charm, willingness to exploit others. And she's smart enough to hide it." "Until now," Robert said. "Until now," Griffith agreed. The case against Vivian and Alphonse was building into something far bigger than a simple murder for hire. Prosecutor Chandler had taken Robert's advice and was going all in. Multiple fraud charges, money laundering, conspiracy, attempted murder, child endangerment. The list grew daily, and Robert kept digging. He found that Alphonse Weiss had his own dark history. A previous position at a firm in New York that had ended abruptly, officially a resignation, but Robert tracked down the HR director who admitted off the record that Alphonse had been fired for sexual harassment. Two former assistants came forward after seeing the news, describing a pattern of manipulation and abuse. Alphonse had used his position to coerce women into relationships, had promised promotions and raises that never materialized, had retaliated against those who rejected him. "He's a predator," one woman, Juliana Short, told Robert over coffee. "But he's smart about it. Never leaves physical evidence, never makes explicit threats. Just creates situations where women feel they have no choice but to comply." "Why didn't you report it?" "I did. To HR, to the EEOC. Nothing happened. He's protected. He has powerful friends, expensive lawyers. And the women who try to fight him, they ended up destroyed, lost their jobs, their reputations. I couldn't afford that fight. What if I told you there's a way to make him pay now? That his current criminal charges could be enhanced if we establish a pattern of behavior." Juliana's eyes sharpened. "I'll testify. Tell me, when and where." Robert left that meeting with contact information for 6 more women willing to testify about Alphonse's history of manipulation and abuse. Each story painted a picture of a man who saw other people as objects, tools to be used and discarded. It was perfect, not just for the criminal case, but for what Robert was really building. Because Robert wasn't just helping the prosecution. He was engineering something far more comprehensive. He was making sure that when Vivian and Alphonse fell, they fell so completely that they could never get back up. Chapter 5. The Web Titans. 2 weeks before the trial, Robert received a call from an unexpected source. "Mr. Beck, this is Saul Hale. I'm a forensic accountant working with the SEC. I understand you've been investigating financial irregularities at Weiss Financial Group." Robert met Saul at a quiet diner on the outskirts of Hartford. The man was in his 60s, sharp-eyed, with the air of someone who'd seen every financial crime imaginable. "The SEC has been watching Alphonse Weiss for 18 months, Saul said without preamble. "We knew he was running a Ponzi-style scheme, using new investor money to pay returns to old investors while skimming off the top. But we couldn't prove it. His records were immaculate. His partner was covering for him." "His partner? You mean Vivian?" "Your wife is a genius with numbers, Mr. Beck. She created a dual-entry system that made Weiss's books look completely legitimate. Every fraudulent transaction was matched with a fake, but technically compliant corresponding entry. It's the most sophisticated cover-up I've seen in 30 years. Why are you telling me this?" Saul smiled grimly. "Because the murder conspiracy was stupid. It was sloppy, emotional, and it gave us the opening we needed. With Vivian and Alphonse in custody, we've been able to execute warrants, seize records, interview employees without fear of retaliation. We're building a federal case that's going to take down not just Alphonse, but several of his associates." "How many people did they steal from?" "At least 230 clients. Total damages around $43 million. Some of these people lost their life savings, their retirement funds. One elderly couple lost everything and had to move in with their daughter." Robert felt his chest tighten. "I had no idea the scope was this large. Neither did most people. That's why we need your help." Saul pulled a tablet from his briefcase, showed Robert a complex flowchart. "Your wife kept meticulous records, too meticulous. She thought she was being careful, but what she actually did was create a roadmap of every crime they committed. If you can help us understand her system, her logic, we can unravel the entire scheme faster." "What do you need me to do?" "Tell me how she thinks. You lived with her for years. When she was stressed, what did she do? When she was planning something, what were her habits? The more we understand her psychology, the better we can predict where she hid additional evidence." Robert spent 3 hours with Saul talking about Vivian's patterns, how she color-coded everything, how she kept backup files of important documents in unexpected places, like photo albums or recipe boxes, how she'd had a filing cabinet in their basement that she'd always kept locked, claiming it held client information she needed to protect. "The basement," Saul said sharply. "Did the police search it?" "They searched the whole house, but I don't know if they opened that cabinet. Vivian always kept the key on her." "Can you guess access?" The next day, Robert led Saul and Detective Griffith to his basement. The filing cabinet stood in the corner, innocuous and gray. Griffith called a locksmith. Inside, they found a treasure trove. Flash drives, notebooks with handwritten records, bank statements for accounts Robert had never heard of, passports, plural, for Vivian under different names, and a ledger that detailed every theft, every manipulation going back 5 years. This is it, Saul breathed. This is everything we need. But it was the last item that made Robert's blood run cold. A life insurance policy. On Lily. $500,000, taken out 6 months ago, with Vivian as the sole beneficiary. Why would she? Robert couldn't finish the sentence. The implication was too horrifying. Detective Griffith's face was grim. Mr. Beck, I think we need to talk about the full scope of what your wife was planning. In the police station conference room, Griffith laid it out. The insurance policy on you wasn't the end game, she said. It was the beginning. Here's what we think was going to happen. They stage your death. Vivian collects $5 million. But that money is from a company Alphonse's firm insures through, which means he controls the investigation, the payout timing, everything. I don't understand, Robert said, though dread was building in his gut. 6 months after your death, the standard mourning period, Vivian and Alphonse get married. They use the insurance money to pay off the clients Alphonse stole from, clean up the books, make the financial crimes disappear. They're home free. But why the policy on Lily? Griffith exchanged a glance with Saul. We found emails between Vivian and Alphonse. They were discussing long-term financial security. In one email, Vivian mentions that Lily is becoming a problem, too smart, asking too many questions. Alphonse responds that they might need to secure additional funds and eliminate complications. The room spun. You're saying they were planning to kill my daughter? We think it was contingency plan. If the investigation into your death went wrong, if suspicions arose, they needed another tragedy to distract everyone. A grieving widow who loses her daughter in an accident? No one would question her after that. They'd see her as a victim, not a suspect. Robert's hands gripped the edge of the table. They were going to murder both of us. Frame me for one crime while collecting insurance on another. And Tommy would have been left with them, with 2 murderers as parents. That's our theory, yes. Robert stood abruptly, needing to move, to pace, to do something with the rage boiling through him. I want them to know. I want Vivian and Alphonse to understand that I found all of this, that I know exactly what they were planning. Can you arrange that? Griffith hesitated. It's not standard procedure. I don't care about procedure. Robert's voice was steel. They try to destroy my family. They need to know they failed. Completely. 2 days later, Robert sat in a visitor's room at Hartford Correctional Center, a glass partition between him and Vivian. She looked haggard, her usually perfect hair limp, no makeup, the orange jumpsuit washing out her complexion. But her eyes were still sharp, calculating. Robert, her voice through the phone was soft, tentative. Thank God you came. I've been trying to reach you. I need to explain. I found a policy on Lily. Vivian's face went blank. I found everything. The filing cabinet, the flash drives, the ledgers. I know about Stephen Humphrey and the others you scammed. I know about the dual-entry accounting system you created for Alphonse. I know you weren't a victim, that you were the architect of all of this. Robert, you have to understand I was going to kill our daughter. Robert's voice was flat, emotionless. After you killed me, after you framed me for crimes I didn't commit, you were going to take out an insurance policy on our 12-year-old child and stage her death. Tears streamed down Vivian's face, but Robert saw them for what they were, calculated, performative. I would never hurt Lily. That policy was it was Alphonse's idea. I didn't mean. Detective Griffith showed me the emails, Vivian. Your emails. Your words. You called our daughter a complication that needed to be eliminated. Robert leaned closer to the glass. I spent 16 years loving you. I gave you everything. I trusted you with our children. And you were willing to murder us all for money you'd stolen from innocent people. Robert, please. No. Robert stood. I came here to tell you that I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you spend the rest of your life in prison. Every victim you've ever scammed is testifying. Every crime you've ever committed is documented. The SEC is building a federal case. The state has multiple charges. And I'm going to be at every hearing, every trial, every parole board, making sure everyone knows exactly who you are. You can't take my children from me. I already have. The family court granted me sole custody yesterday. You'll never see Tommy or Lily again unless they choose to see you. And Lily, Robert's smile was cold. Lily knows everything. She knows you plan to kill us. She knows you're a fraud. She knows that the mother she loved never really existed. Vivian's composure cracked. You turned her against me. No, Vivian, you did that yourself. Robert hung up the phone and walked away, her screams following him down the corridor. He felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no sadness. Just a cold, certain knowledge that he'd done what needed to be done. Outside, in his car, Robert allowed himself one moment of grief. For the life he'd thought he had, for the woman he'd thought he'd married, for the innocence his children had lost. Then he started the engine and drove home, where Lily and Tommy were waiting. Chapter 6. The Architect's Design. Robert Beck understood revenge the way he understood art, as something that required patience, precision, and an eye for the perfect composition. Over the next month, as Vivian and Alphonse's trial date approached, he became the puppet master of their destruction. It started small. An anonymous tip to the IRS about unreported income. A carefully worded letter to the Connecticut Bar Association about Alphonse's brother, Hobart Evans, who was an attorney and had helped draft some of the fraudulent documents. And it escalated. Robert discovered that Alphonse had a son from a previous marriage, a young man named Christopher Connor who'd changed his surname to distance himself from his father. Christopher was a social worker who specialized in family counseling, a genuinely good man who'd spent his life trying to atone for bearing Alphonse's DNA. Robert reached out to him. They met at a coffee shop in New Haven. Christopher was in his late 20s, with kind eyes and a tired smile. I saw the news, Christopher said. I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm not. My father has always been exactly what you discovered. I'm sorry you have to deal with this, Robert said. But I need to ask, would you be willing to testify about his character? About what you witnessed growing up? Christopher stared into his coffee. He was abusive. Emotionally, psychologically. He'd tell my mother she was worthless, that she was lucky he stayed with her. He'd manipulate situations to make himself look like the victim while destroying anyone who challenged him. When I was 16, I watched him ruin my mother's sister, his own sister-in-law, by spreading lies about her, getting her fired from her job, all because she'd confronted him about cheating. Did your mother ever leave him? She tried. 3 times. Each time, he'd use his connections, his money, his lawyers. He'd threaten to take me away, to prove she was an unfit mother. She gave up eventually. She died when I was 22, officially a heart attack, but I think it was just giving up. I'm sorry, Robert said quietly. Don't be. It made me who I am. Made me determined to never become him. Christopher looked up. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. My father needs to understand that his actions have consequences, that he can't manipulate and destroy people forever. Robert gained another ally, but his most powerful move came from an unexpected source. Rico Bonilla called him late one night. Robert's best friend from art school had been following the case for Boston, horrified by what had happened. I have something you need to see, Rico said. Remember how I mentioned I was dating someone who works in insurance fraud investigation? Vaguely. Her name is Amber Clay. She's been looking into Alphonse's firm independently because one of the clients who lost money was her grandmother. When she heard about your case, she started digging deeper, and she found something. 2 days later, Robert sat in a Boston hotel room with Rico and Amber, looking at documents that made his hands shake. This is a life insurance policy on Alphonse Weiss, Amber said, pointing to the first page. Taken out 18 months ago. $10 million. The beneficiary is listed as A. Palmer. A. Palmer, Robert repeated. Vivian's maiden name. Right. Now look at this. Amber showed him another document. This is a policy on Vivian Beck, taken out at the same time. Also $10 million. Beneficiary, A. Weiss. Robert's mind raced. They had policies on each other? They did. Now watch this. Amber pulled up emails on her laptop. These are from Vivian's C's computer, obtained through the SEC investigation. 6 months ago, Vivian and Alphonse were discussing their exit strategy. But here's where it gets interesting. They weren't planning to live happily ever after. She highlighted specific passages. From Vivian, once the inheritance clears and the investigation dies down, we'll need to discuss the Cayman accounts. My lawyers will handle the transfer. From Alphonse, agreed, though I should note that the policy matures in 12 months. After that, we'll need to reassess our partnership. From Vivian, partnership has an expiration date. We both know that. They were planning to kill each other, Robert said slowly. After they killed me. After they collected my insurance, cleaned up the financial crimes, and secured the money. That's my theory, Amber said. They were never in love. They were business partners planning a series of murders for profit. And eventually, one of them would have killed the other to keep the entire fortune. Robert sat back, stunned. The scope of Vivian and Alphonse's sociopathy was breathtaking. They hadn't just planned to kill him. They'd planned to kill everyone, including each other. Can this be used in court? Robert asked. Absolutely. It goes to motive, to character, to premeditation. It shows they're both capable of planning multiple murders. Amber's smile was sharp. It also means that neither of them can claim they were the victim of the other. They're both equally culpable. Robert returned to Hartford with new ammunition. He met with Prosecutor Chandler and Detective Griffith, showing them everything Amber had found. This changes the narrative completely, Chandler said. We weren't just dealing with a murder-for-hire plot. We were dealing with 2 serial killers in training. Can you use it? Robert asked. Oh, we're going to do more than use it. Chandler's expression was predatory. We're going to make this case so bulletproof that no jury, no judge, no parole board will ever consider showing them mercy. The trial began on a cold November morning. The courthouse was packed. Media, victims of the financial crimes, curious onlookers, and Robert, sitting in the front row with Lily beside him and Tommy, with a babysitter outside. Vivian and Alphonse sat at separate defense tables per their lawyers' requests. They hadn't looked at each other once. Over the next 3 weeks, the prosecution laid out a case that was devastating in its thoroughness. Financial records showing $43 million in theft. Testimony from Stephen Humphrey and other victims of Vivian's past cons. Christopher Connor's wrenching account of Alphonse's abusive nature. Detective Griffith's explanation of the planted evidence. Audio recordings of Vivian and Alphonse discussing Robert's murder. The insurance policies revealing their plan to eventually kill each other. But the moment that broke the case came in the 3rd week. Lily Beck took the stand. At 12 years old, she was small and young-looking, but her voice was steady as she faced the jury. My mother, she said clearly, told Mr. Weiss that I was becoming a problem. I heard her say I asked too many questions. She said I might figure out what they were doing. How did that make you feel? The prosecutor asked gently. Scared, because I realized that if I was a problem, they might. Lily's voice wavered, but she continued. They might try to fix that problem, the way they were going to fix my dad being a problem. In the gallery, Vivian was crying, but the jury wasn't looking at her. They were looking at Lily, at a child who'd had to face the knowledge that her mother had considered killing her. The defense tried to paint Vivian as a victim of Alphonse's manipulation, a woman who'd been coerced into terrible acts. But the evidence told a different story. The emails showed Vivian initiating many of the plans. The insurance policies were taken out in her name. The financial schemes predated her relationship with Alphonse. And when the mutual insurance policies came to light, revealing that Vivian and Alphonse had planned to eventually murder each other, whatever sympathy the jury might have felt evaporated. Alphonse's defense was no better. His attorney tried to claim that Vivian had manipulated him, that he'd been drawn into her schemes. But Christopher's testimony about years of abuse, combined with testimony from Juliana Short and other women about his pattern of manipulation, painted a picture of a man who'd been a predator long before he met Vivian. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Both of them. Conspiracy to commit murder. Multiple counts of fraud. Money laundering. Child endangerment. Attempted insurance fraud. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. Vivian Palmer Beck, 75 years to life, with no possibility of parole for 50 years. Alphonse Weiss, 80 years to life, with no possibility of parole for 50 years. They'd both be over 100 years old before they could even apply for freedom. In practical terms, they'd die in prison. As the judge read the sentences, Robert felt Lily's hand slip into his. He looked down at his daughter, saw tears streaming down her face, not of sadness, but of relief. "It's over," she whispered. "It's over," Robert confirmed. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Robert made a brief statement. "Justice was served today, not just for my family, but for every person Vivian Beck and Alphonse Weiss victimized over the years. To the clients who lost their savings, to the women Alphonse harassed and abused, to everyone hurt by these two predators, this verdict is for you. My children and I can now move forward, knowing that the people who threatened our lives will never harm anyone again." That evening, Robert sat in his studio with Lily and Tommy. The baby was playing with blocks, innocent of the drama that had swirled around him. Lily was doing homework, or pretending to. "Dad," she said quietly, "do you think Mom ever really loved us?" Robert had been asking himself that question for months. "I think," he said carefully, "that your mother is missing something most people have, the ability to truly care about others more than she cares about herself. Maybe at the beginning, when we first met, there was something real. But over time, that got buried under greed and selfishness. By the end, I don't think she was capable of real love anymore." "That's sad," Lily said. "It is. But it's not your fault, or mine, or Tommy's. We loved her. We were good to her. She made choices that destroyed what we had. That's on her, not us." Lily nodded, then went back to her homework. Robert picked up Tommy, held his son close, and looked out the window at the darkening sky. He'd won. His children were safe. The monsters were caged. But the victory felt less like triumph and more like survival. Because at the end of the day, he was a single father with 2 traumatized children, trying to rebuild a life from the ashes of betrayal. The real fight, he realized, was just beginning. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. 3 months after the sentencing, Robert Beck stood in the middle of his living room, surrounded by boxes. He was moving, not far, just to a different neighborhood where there were fewer memories, fewer reminders of the life he'd thought he had. Lily had helped him choose the house. It was smaller than their old place, but brighter, with a yard where Tommy could play and a studio for Robert that had better natural light. A fresh start, as much as such a thing was possible. "Dad, look what I found." Lily emerged from the basement carrying a photo album. She opened it to a picture of their family from 4 years ago, Robert, Vivian, and baby Lily at the beach, all smiling. Robert braced himself for pain, but what he felt was more complicated. Grief, yes, but also a strange sort of peace. That happy family in the photo had been real once, before Vivian's greed poisoned everything. He could acknowledge that now, without letting it destroy him. "Want to keep it?" he asked. Lily studied the photo for a long moment. "Yeah, not for her. For me. Because I was happy then, even if it was based on a lie. That happiness was real to me, and I don't want to forget what it felt like." "Okay." Robert pulled his daughter close. "We'll keep the good memories and learn from the bad ones." The move helped, but it wasn't a magic cure. Lily had nightmares. Tommy became clingy, crying whenever Robert left the room. And Robert himself found that he couldn't fully trust anyone anymore. Every interaction was filtered through suspicion, every kindness examined for ulterior motives. He started seeing a therapist, a patient woman named Ellen Riggs, who specialized in trauma from domestic betrayal. "You're trying to carry all of this alone," Ellen told him during their 4th session. "You're trying to be strong for your kids, to rebuild your life, to process your trauma, all while maintaining your career and your sanity. That's not sustainable. What choice do I have? You have the choice to ask for help, to lean on friends, to let yourself be vulnerable. Vulnerability is what got me into this mess," Robert said bitterly. "No, loving someone who is unworthy of that love is what got you into this mess. That's different than being open to connection with people who deserve your trust. It took Robert 2 more months to even partially accept that advice. But slowly, carefully, he started letting people back in. Rico visited from Boston, spending weekends helping with the house and playing with the kids. Amber came too, bringing her warm presence and her own story of family betrayal that helped Robert feel less alone. Georgia Bradley, the woman from Weiss Financial who'd called Robert after the arrests, became an unexpected friend. She was dealing with her own guilt. She'd worked at the firm, had seen signs of Alphonse's crimes, but had been too afraid to report them. She and Robert formed a kind of support group, two people trying to forgive themselves for not seeing the monsters among them. "I should have known," Georgia said over coffee one afternoon. "I processed those transactions. I saw the irregularities. But Alphonse was so convincing, so confident, and I needed the job." "You were a victim too," Robert told her. "Alphonse created an environment where people were too afraid to speak up. That's not your fault. Then why does it feel like it is?" Robert didn't have an answer for that. Guilt, he was learning, didn't care about logic or fairness. It just existed, heavy and persistent, coloring everything. The civil cases were wrapping up. With Vivian and Alphonse in prison, their assets had been seized to compensate victims of the financial crimes. Robert and his children were entitled to a portion, restitution for the trauma, for the murder plot, for everything they'd endured. The settlement was substantial, enough to secure Tommy and Lily's future, to pay off the mortgage on the new house, to allow Robert to take fewer court commissions and focus on personal art for the first time in years. "Feels dirty," Robert told his lawyer, Marcel Harrell, at the settlement signing. "Like I'm profiting from my own attempted murder." "You're not profiting. You're being compensated for what they try to take from you. Your life, your peace, your children's innocence. This money represents justice, not profit." Robert signed the papers, but Marcel's words didn't make it feel any cleaner. The 6th month after the trial brought an unexpected visitor. Christopher Connor stood on Robert's doorstep, looking nervous. "I hope this isn't weird," Christopher said, "but I want to check on you and your kids." And he hesitated. "I wanted to apologize." "For what?" "For my father. I know I'm not responsible for his actions, but he's my blood. And everything he did to you, everything he planned. I feel like I should have warned you somehow, should have told someone what he was capable of." Robert invited him in. Over coffee, they talked about the burden of being related to monsters, about guilt that logically shouldn't exist but does anyway, about the challenge of building a life when your foundation is cracked. "I've been thinking," Christopher said, "about starting a support group for families of criminals. People who are trying to process the actions of someone they loved or thought they loved." "Would you include children of the criminals?" Robert asked, thinking of Lily and Tommy. "Especially children. They're the most vulnerable, the ones who didn't choose any of this." "Count us in," Robert said. The support group became a lifeline. Meeting every other week in the community center, it brought together people from all walks of life. Children of murderers, spouses of embezzlers, parents of rapists, siblings of terrorists. People who carried the weight of association were trying to figure out how to love someone while condemning their actions. Lily attended the youth sessions. She made friends with other kids who understood what it meant to have a parent in prison, to love and hate someone simultaneously, to carry shame for crimes they didn't commit. "It helps," Lily told Robert after a 3rd meeting. "Knowing I'm not alone. Knowing other kids get it." Robert's art evolved during this period. His courtroom sketches became more nuanced, capturing not just the faces of defendants, but the complicated emotions of victims, families, witnesses. His personal work took on darker tones. Studies in betrayal, in the masks people wore, in the distance between who someone appeared to be and who they really were. A gallery in Hartford approached him about a show. "Your work has always been technically brilliant," the curator said, "but these new pieces have depth, emotional weight. They're haunting." Robert agreed to the show, though he insisted that all proceeds beyond his costs would go to victims of financial crimes, the people Alphonse and Vivian had destroyed. The opening night was surreal. People moving through the gallery, studying his pain rendered in charcoal and paint. Critics praised his unflinching examination of human duplicity. Collectors offered 5 figures for pieces Robert had created in the depths of grief. "It's exploitation," Robert said to Rico, watching a woman in diamonds admire a portrait titled The Wife. "It's alchemy," Rico corrected. "You took your trauma and turned it into something meaningful. Something that makes people think, feel, understand. That's not exploitation. That's art." Maybe Rico was right. Maybe there was value in sharing his story, in letting others see that betrayal and survival and healing were messy, complicated processes that didn't resolve neatly. Chapter 8. The Unexpected Trap. Robert's carefully reconstructed life came crashing down on a Tuesday in May, 18 months after Vivian's conviction. He was at the studio when Detective Griffith called. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. Vivian's attorney just filed an appeal. They're claiming ineffective counsel, presenting new evidence that supposedly exonerates her. What evidence? A witness who claims Alphonse Weiss threatened Vivian with harm to her children if she didn't cooperate, and a psychologist who evaluated her and diagnosed her with battered spouse syndrome. Robert's laugh was harsh. "That's absurd. Vivian initiated half the schemes. The emails prove it." "I know, but her attorney is good. Ronnie Bowen, one of the best appellate lawyers in the state. He's arguing that the emails were taken out of context, that Vivian was trying to appease Alphonse to protect her family, that she never actually intended to harm you." The jury saw through that story the first time. The jury in the criminal trial, yes. But this is an appellate court. They'll only review the legal proceedings, look for errors, consider new evidence that wasn't available at trial. If Bowen can convince them that Vivian's trial attorney was incompetent or that this new witness testimony is credible, she could get a new trial. Robert felt sick, or a reduced sentence, or, in the worst case, a reversal of the conviction. Griffith's voice was grim. "I'm not saying it will happen, but we need to be prepared." Robert called Joshua Chandler immediately. The prosecutor was equally disturbed. "This witness," Chandler said, "claims to be a friend of Vivian's who was present during conversations where Alphonse threatened her. The problem is this person didn't come forward during the investigation, wasn't mentioned in any of Vivian's statements, and suddenly appears now with convenient testimony." "Who is it?" "A woman named Vonda Rhodes. She claims she was afraid to testify before, but has had a crisis of conscience." Robert tracked down Vonda Rhodes. It wasn't hard. She'd listed her address in the court filing. He showed up at her apartment unannounced, with a recording device in his pocket. "Mr. Beck," Vonda said when she opened the door. She was in her 40s, nervous energy radiating off her. "I was wondering when you'd find me." "Tell me the truth," Robert said. "Did Alphonse threaten Vivian?" "He did. I saw it happen. I heard him tell her that if she didn't help him with his plans, he'd hurt her children." "When was this?" "About 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half." "Interesting, because Vivian and Alphonse's affair started 18 months ago. The financial crimes started 3 years ago. So your timeline doesn't match the evidence." Vonda's eyes flickered. "I might be misremembering the exact date. How much is Vivian's family paying you?" Robert asked bluntly. "I don't know what you're talking about." Vivian's parents, Palmer Sr. and his wife. They lost everything in the 2008 crash, but they still have connections, still have friends with money. "How much are they paying you to lie?" "You can't prove." "I don't have to prove anything. The prosecution will. They'll examine your phone records, your bank accounts, your communications. And when they find the money trail, and they will find it, you'll be charged with perjury, obstruction of justice, and possibly conspiracy." Vonda's face crumbled. "They said it would be easy. Just tell the story. Help Vivian get another chance. They said she's innocent, that she was manipulated, that her children need their mother." "Her children?" Robert's voice was cold. "I'm her children's father. I'm the one who held Tommy when he cried for his mother. I'm the one who sat with Lily through nightmares. Vivian tried to murder us. She's not innocent. She's not a victim, and she doesn't deserve another chance. But the money, I'll give you twice what they're paying you," Robert said. "In exchange, you tell the truth. You admit you were paid to lie. You help us prove that Vivian's family is trying to obstruct justice." Vonda stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm done playing defense. It's time to go on offense. With Vonda's cooperation, the prosecution built a case against Vivian's parents and her appellate attorney. Ronnie Bowen, it turned out, had a history of questionable tactics, suborning perjury, manufacturing evidence, exploiting technicalities. The Bar Association had investigated him twice, but never found enough evidence to disbar him. Until now. This is bigger than just Vivian's appeal, Prosecutor Chandler explained to Robert. If we can prove Bowen knowingly used a paid false witness, we can disbar him and potentially charge him criminally. It sent a message that this kind of corruption won't be tolerated. The appeals court hearing was scheduled for June. But before it could happen, several things occurred in rapid succession. First, Vonda Rhodes filed an affidavit admitting she'd been paid to give false testimony. She named Vivian's parents and Ronnie Bowen as the people who'd approached her. Second, the Bar Association opened an emergency investigation into Bowen, suspending his license pending the outcome. Third, Detective Griffith discovered that this wasn't Vivian's only attempt to overturn her conviction. She'd been communicating with her parents from prison, coordinating multiple plans to secure her release, including a scheme to have Robert charged with perjury for his trial testimony, and a plot to have Alphonse killed in prison to eliminate him as a witness. Your wife, Griffith told Robert, is operating a criminal enterprise from inside prison. She's using her parents as proxies, paying people to commit crimes, orchestrating appeals and schemes. She's not rehabilitating. She's escalating. The final blow came when federal prosecutors announced they were charging Vivian with additional crimes: witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit murder for the plot to have Alphonse killed. Each charge carried additional prison time. At the appeals hearing, with Vonda's affidavit and the evidence of Vivian's ongoing criminal activity, the judge was scathing. Mrs. Beck, the judge said, "You have demonstrated not even a modicum of remorse or rehabilitation. You used your appellate rights not to seek justice, but to perpetuate fraud and obstruct the legal process. Your appeal is denied. Furthermore, I'm recommending that the Department of Corrections review your communications and visitors, and that you be placed in a more restrictive facility to prevent further criminal activity." Vivian's scream echoed through the courtroom as bailiffs led her away. But Robert barely heard it, because he was watching Vivian's parents, Palmer Sr. and his wife, being led out in handcuffs. They'd been arrested on the spot for their role in the witness tampering scheme. It was poetic, Robert thought. Vivian's father had taught her that crime paid, that manipulation was a valid life strategy. Now both of them would die in prison for those beliefs. "How do you feel?" Detective Griffith asked him afterward. "I feel like I can breathe," Robert said. Chapter 9. The Architect's Victory. 2 years after Vivian's conviction, Robert Beck stood in the courtyard of his new house, watching Tommy chase butterflies through the garden while Lily read on a bench nearby. The June sun was warm, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Robert felt at peace. The civil lawsuits had finally settled. Vivian's parents were in prison. Ronnie Bowen had been disbarred and was facing criminal charges. Alphonse Weiss's appeals had been denied. Every person who'd been part of the conspiracy, who'd tried to destroy Robert's family, had been held accountable. But the real victory wasn't legal. It was here, in this garden, with his children. Lily was thriving. She joined the school newspaper, was getting straight A's, and had started talking about becoming a lawyer, someone who helps victims, she said, not criminals. The nightmares were less frequent. She smiled more easily. Tommy, at 3 years old, had no memory of the events that had nearly killed him. He was a happy, energetic child who loved trucks and dinosaurs and his father's charcoal-stained hands. "Dad," Lily called. "Georgia just texted. She's bringing dinner around 6. "Tell her that's perfect," Robert called back. Georgia Bradley had become a fixture in their lives, a friend, a surrogate aunt to the kids, someone who understood the particular trauma of realizing you'd worked alongside a monster. She was dating Christopher Connor now, the two of them bonding over their connections to the case and their determination to build something good from the wreckage. Robert's art career had taken off. His exhibition on betrayal and survival had led to commissions, interviews, and an invitation to teach a masterclass at Yale. He still did courtroom sketches, That steady income was important. But now he could be selective, choosing cases that interested him rather than taking every job that came along. The support group Christopher had started was thriving, with chapters in 3 cities. Lily was helping to create a resource guide for children of incarcerated parents. Tommy was too young to understand, but someday he'd know that his family had turned their tragedy into something that helped others. Mr. Beck, Robert turned to find a young woman at the garden gate. She looked nervous, clutching a folder. "I'm Phyllis Kramer," she said. "I'm a producer for a documentary series about financial crimes. I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk about your case." Robert had fielded dozens of these requests over the past 2 years. He'd turned down most of them, uncomfortable with the idea of his family's trauma becoming entertainment. But something about Phyllis's earnest expression made him pause. "What's the angle?" he asked. "Not just the crime, but the aftermath. How victims rebuild, how systems fail and succeed, how people find justice. We want to show that these stories don't end with a verdict. They continue for years. And you want to include my children?" Robert's voice was protective. "Only if they want to participate, and only in age-appropriate ways. Lily, if she's willing, could talk about the youth support group. Tommy wouldn't be identified or included at all." Robert thought about it. Thought about all the people who'd helped him over the past 2 years, who'd share their stories so he'd feel less alone. Maybe it was time to pay that forward. "I'll think about it," he said. "Talk to my lawyer, set up a meeting. If I decide to do it, it'll be on my terms." Phyllis left her card and departed. Robert watched her go, then turned back to his children. Lily had put down her book and was watching him. "You should do it," she said. "You think. I think people need to know that you can survive something like this, that the bad guys can lose, that families can heal." She smiled. "Besides, if you do it, I want to be interviewed. I want to tell people that even when your parent betrays you, even when everything falls apart, you can still be okay." "You're pretty wise for 14, Robert said. "I learned from the best." Lily hugged him. "You protected us, Dad. You never gave up. You made sure we were safe, and that the people who hurt us face consequences. You're the reason we're okay." Robert held his daughter, overwhelmed by emotion. He'd spent 2 years second-guessing every decision, wondering if he'd done enough, worrying about the scars his children would carry. But Lily was right. They were okay. Not undamaged. Trauma didn't work that way. But surviving, healing, growing. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Robert stood in his studio. The space smelled of charcoal and paint, familiar and comforting. He'd been working on a new series, not about betrayal this time, but about resilience. Portraits of people he'd met through the support group, through the case, through the years of rebuilding. People who'd survived the unsurvivable and found reasons to keep going. He picked up his charcoal and started a new piece. Not a portrait this time, but something abstract, light breaking through darkness, chaos resolving into order. His phone rang. Joshua Chandler, the prosecutor. "Wanted to give you an update," Chandler said. "Alphonse Weiss was found dead in his cell this morning. Natural causes, heart attack. He was 62. Robert waited for some feeling, satisfaction, relief, anything. But all he felt was a distant sadness for the people Alphonse had hurt, for the life he'd wasted on cruelty and greed. And Vivian, still serving her sentence. She'll be eligible for parole in 48 years. She's 78 years old then. She'll never get out, Robert said. Probably not. And even if she does, she'll be too old to harm anyone. After they hung up, Robert returned to his drawing. He thought about Vivian, locked in a cell, aging, isolated from everyone she'd tried to destroy. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined when this all started. He'd fantasized about more dramatic revenge, about making her suffer the way she'd made him suffer. But this quiet, persistent justice was better. Vivian would spend the rest of her life in prison, her freedom gone, her schemes exposed, her children lost to her forever. She'd become exactly what her father had been, a cautionary tale about the cost of greed. And Robert? Robert had his children, his career, his peace. He'd won not by becoming like Vivian and Alphonse, not by descending to their level, but by being exactly who he'd always been, a good father, a decent man, someone who believed in justice over revenge. Dad, Tommy's small voice came from the doorway. I had a bad dream. Robert set down his charcoal and scooped up his son. Want to tell me about it? There was a scary lady. But you were there, and you made her go away. That's because I'll always protect you, Robert said. No matter what. You're safe, Tommy. You and Lily both. I promise. Tommy nestled against his chest, already half asleep again. Robert carried him back to bed, tucked him in, and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching his son sleep peacefully. This, Robert thought, was victory. Not the convictions, not the money, not the public vindication. This, his children safe and loved, their lives moving forward, their future secure. He'd been tested in the worst possible way. His wife had betrayed him, tried to murder him, threatened his children. The system he'd trusted had nearly failed. The life he'd built had been revealed as a lie. But he'd survived. More than survived, he'd won. Not by destroying his enemies, though they'd been destroyed. Not by seeking revenge, though justice had been served. But by refusing to let hatred consume him. By protecting what mattered most. By rebuilding with purpose and love. Robert Beck, the artist who read faces, who'd spent 20 years studying human nature, had learned the most important lesson of all. The monsters might be real. The betrayals might be devastating. The pain might be overwhelming. But love, true, unconditional, protective love, was stronger than all of it. And in the end, love had won. As Robert returned to his studio and picked up his charcoal once more, he began to sketch a new image. Not darkness and light this time, but something simpler, a father and his two children, arms around each other, facing forward. Moving on, he titled it Survived. And in that moment, surrounded by the evidence of his rebuilt life, Robert Beck finally, truly felt free. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.